we have got the world's worst Prime Minister. It's so dull, it's so ridiculous. He's not in Washington, D.C., where he should be because he wasn't invited. Instead, he's going to be sitting in Downing Street in a dark room, presumably with a portrait of somebody over his head who isn't British, thinking, where did it all go wrong? Isabel Oakeshott's here. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Not going to take it anymore. I mean, how much do we all feel like that right now?
Isn't it
we
true?
don't want to take it anymore, except we have to take it because there's no opportunity to boot this sorry lot out.
Yes, but I think just even the advent of Trump Mark II is going to have an effect on everybody, I think, in the world, whether it's the EU, whether it's the UK government. You know, they're all going to have to be a bit more kind of, I don't know, careful about the kinds of things that they get up to, because look at how he's already changed, you know, corporate America. Wall Street has done away with all the DEI stuff. You know, he's going to get rid of it in the military. There's going to be a much different atmosphere, I think, in the Western world.
Absolutely, and I think we all know that what happens in America does completely percolate over here. Obviously, there'll be tremendous resistance from our Labour-led government to falling in any way into line with what Trump's doing over there. But I still think it will have a seismic effect culturally in the UK and will give a huge boost to parties in the UK that don't stand for any of that stuff, to all those who support the whole we're not going to take this anymore thing. I think perhaps net zero is one of the most obvious areas in which Trump's influence will quite significantly undermine the kind of medium to long-term value of all those vested interests and companies that are feeding off the net zero frenzy, which Mad Ed Miliband is still peddling to the absolute best of his ability. On the DEI thing, I mean, it'd be nice to think, wouldn't it, that would affect the attitude to that amongst corporate UK. I think that they'll be a bit slower. In fact, they'll probably make an absolute point of holding on to all of this stuff just out of sheer anti-Trumpery. But it's super interesting to look at the atmosphere surrounding Trump's inauguration today, this time round versus last time round. You know, an absolute sense this time round that he is the legitimate person. He's got there properly, not as a result of some completely ludicrous fictional Russian collusion, and that there is a sort of revolutionary feeling about this. The establishment in America has just damn well had to accept, and more than that, if they're not going to embrace it, they're at least going to make the kind of noises that suggest that they are going to more than lean into it.
Absolutely right, because apparently I'm told the hosts on CNN this morning are looking a bit puce and not looking terribly happy about what they're going to have to cover this afternoon. The BBC yesterday, Laura Kunsberg, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, not only was she continuing to refuse to admit that Hamas was a terrorist organisation, kept referring to it as an organisation prescribed by many countries in the world, she then started kind of quizzing anyone that was talking about Donald Trump about, well, how on earth could anybody work with him? He's dangerous. He's you know, he's unpredictable. Can you believe anything he says? She was so disappointed, speaking to Fiona Hill, who used to be Theresa May's, you know, chief of staff, when she said to her, you know, what was he like to deal with? And Fiona Hill said, well, actually, we found him to be very reasonable. We found him to be very much on top of his brief. He knew exactly what we wanted to talk about. And when we talked about defence, he was very good on that. You know, and Kunsberg's face was a picture. She was like, she couldn't quite believe that could be the man that she hates.
Well, I mean, maybe the Labour lot won't have an awful lot of interaction with him. I mean, of course, he's going to have to go through the motions. He's not going to be rude to our UK government. But at the same time, I don't think that Donald Trump is going to actively seek out opportunities who would to hang out with Keir Starmer. And I mean, what a humiliation, really, it is for the Prime Minister that Nigel Farage is at that inauguration and Keir Starmer, is not. And it will be super interesting this week to see what happens with the Chagos deal.
Yes.
Because I know that that Farage has been trying and working extremely hard to get the US administration to engage with the detail of this truly lousy, wretched, treasonous deal. And I think that's been quite challenging because naturally they've got many, many, many big fish to fry. But I sense that because there was a setback on the Chagos deal at the end of last week, it is looking a little bit more optimistic and positive that Trump's people have now properly engaged with this disaster, looming disaster. And there's a great deal of reason to hope that it may be torn up by the new administration.
Yeah.
Again, it would be a massive humiliation for Starmer.
Of course it would. Let's have a look at what happened last night. It's a real feel-good factor in America right now, particularly in Washington, D.C. As you say, Nigel Farage is there, Nick Candy's there, Liz Truss is there. There's a whole bunch of British people from the right of politics who are having a great time. Thank you very much indeed. Check this out.
Tomorrow at noon, the curtain closes on 4 long years of American decline, and we begin a brand new day of American strength and prosperity, dignity and pride. Bringing it all back. Once and for all, we're going to end the reign of a failed and corrupt political establishment in Washington, a failed administration. We're not going to take it anymore. We're going to stop the invasion of our borders. We're going to reclaim our wealth. We're going to unlock the liquid gold that's right under our feet, liquid gold. We're going to bring back law and order to our cities. We're going to restore patriotism to our schools, get radical left, woke ideologies the hell out of our military and out of our government. And we are going to make America great again.
I genuinely think that he is. I mean, it's a feel-good thing, isn't it? So much of politics for me is about confidence. It's about, you know, confidence in the country, pride in the country, which we've sort of lost here, haven't we?
Oh, 100%. I mean, which one of those things that he just rattled off isn't something that we would all want for the UK? You know, the UK is crying out for every single one of the changes that he promised to make. And this time round, he's going to have a bit more leeway because he controls so much more of the machinery of government. So I really think we're on the cusp of something pretty exciting over there. And I think that it will really, as we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, boost those who are pushing for a similar agenda here in the UK. I mean, who doesn't want liquid gold? We want liquid gold in the UK too.
Exactly. And I mean, a story in the Telegraph today about Santander, who are reportedly considering leaving Britain because of excessive red tape. I mean, we all know what that feels like, but it could affect 14 million customers and affect tens of thousands of staff because they're thinking of literally just upping sticks and moving to another country. So much so that they're joining what can only be described as an avalanche of people leaving the country. And the Labour government don't seem to realise that that's happening.
Well, I mean, it's just not surprising at all, is it? If you make your own country a hostile place for employers, for wealth creators, for risk takers, and even just for people who are just working really, really hard in their chosen field and feel that far too much of what they are earning is going to bad causes, then people will leave. You know, we live in a very mobile world these days. Some of our viewers and listeners may have noticed that there was some media coverage over the weekend about the fact that I myself am currently based in the Middle East. And one of the reasons I've left is because of Labour's VAT policy on school fees. I've got 3 children at private schools, and that was actually just the final straw for me. I can't pay that VAT on school fees. So I've done what so many thousands of other people have done, and I've looked for an alternative. And there are places in the world where things actually work. There isn't very much crime at all. The sun shines and people are civilized to each other. And why not exercise that freedom to move if you can?
Right. And loads of people are doing it. I mean, I was watching Darren Jones yesterday being interviewed on various different programmes in the morning, and he didn't seem to understand. This is, you know, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's deputy, effectively. She's in Davos, so as in his words, not available, so he talks on her behalf. And he didn't seem to fully understand the fact that if you start taxing people to the point where they are considering leaving the country because that tax is so high, he didn't seem to grasp the fact that you don't actually end up with more money, you end up with less money, because they tend to leave and they tend to have the ability to live in other places and they no longer pay tax. And this whole non-dom argument that they made, where they said they were going to make billions of pounds from these very wealthy individuals, hasn't come to pass because it turns out they've all gone.
Well, I mean, how would you not understand that? To me, that says that these decision makers don't spend nearly enough time around the super rich.
Right.
The super rich are not super rich because they just toss their money around, you know, willy-nilly. They're super rich because they are smart about their assets. And the idea that non-doms are just going to say, oh, fine then, you're just about to wallop me with a load more tax, so I'm just going to sit in the UK and pay your pernicious tax. Of course not. They just move. You know, for many people in that non-dom category, their attitude, whether we like it or not, whether we approve of this, is they sort of see countries like hotels. And if it comes to the point that you are paying 6-star prices for a 3 or 2-star hotel, you just move hotels. That's their psychology. So they will just leave the UK. They have left the UK. That was one of the stupidest blunders of many blunders that this government has made. And I can tell you one of the other cohorts that's leaving in droves, and it's at the other end of the spectrum. It's actually teachers. Teachers from the UK who are not paid well in the UK, working in really terrible circumstances, many of them in the roughest, most deprived schools, where discipline is an ever constant challenge, and it's just a rubbish job for many people. Well, they can come over to places like the Middle East and work in great British schools, following the British curriculum, and be paid tax-free. And do you know what? They get their accommodation paid for, and they also get a discount or even free education for their kids. Once again, it's a no-brainer.
And do you know what's interesting as well? I've only just thought of this, talking about this. My daughter, who, as you know, also lives in the Middle East, she has a sort of cohort of about 6 friends that all graduated at the same time from university. And she occasionally gets together with them. They're at that age when they're sort of getting married to different people and stuff. Not one of them lives in Britain. Not one.
And this is a tragedy.
And they're all professionals, and they're all making good money, and they're all in interesting jobs around the world.
It's a tragedy. I don't want to be down on our country. You know, the UK is a fantastic, amazing country. And here's the encouraging thing. You know, I feel like I'm international now. You know, my title at Talk is International Editor.
We didn't know it was going to lead to this, but there we are.
I'm obviously talking to people all the time. And Britain is still held in tremendous regard. Yeah. But there's also a real sense of sadness. And people do see from the outside, people do see what is happening to our country. The single thing they say most often is about violence and crime. That's the fear that they've got. I don't want the younger generations to feel that they can't build a future in Britain. But that is the mood amongst many, many young people, whether it's in their early 20s, their late 20s, or even their early 30s. They're just thinking, you know what, I'm just going to opt out of this for a bit because it isn't the place where I'm going to be able to build the best future for myself. I think we can turn that all around, by the way, but not under this government, hopefully under totally more Trump-like administration.
It did happen before. It happened in the 70s before Margaret Thatcher came in, and then people started coming back as they saw the economy, preparing itself for a new era. And as people, suddenly found jobs in the city and the Big Bang and everything happened. Chloe has sent us this. She says, Mike, my son's 30 and his wife and he are moving to Washington in the USA in June. They've just sold their house. They can't wait to leave the UK. Hard-working, responsible people who can see this country is on the slide. And much of that is also to do with people. You say crime, which is right and true. People are fed up with it. But also they're fed up with what they see as a country that doesn't reward success, and it actually rewards failure. It rewards people who come here from other countries illegally. It rewards people who don't want to go to work. I mean, a story in the Telegraph today, and I know it's an unusually kind of niche story, but apparently there's something called the Access to Work scheme, which allows claimants to claim £69,000 a year for equipment and support, including work coaches, noise-cancelling headphones, Apple smartwatches. The budget for this has soared by 40% in 2 years. It's now £258 million, this budget, and it's generally being used by people who are claiming they're suffering from ADHD.
Well, I mean, this is just absolutely outrageous. You know, I'm sure ADHD is very real for some people.
Yeah.
But frankly, even if it is real for some people, however bad their case, I don't think the taxpayer should be funding them to have ear pods and noise-cancelling headphones. Sorry, that's on you. You know, most of us have to look after ourselves when we have things that don't go entirely to plan. And I'm sure those people are entitled to a bunch of other benefits too. This is the kind of thing that really, really gets hardworking people. You know, they've got only now, 10 days in which they've got to pay their tax, their self-assessment. People who are running small businesses, self-employed freelancers. And when they send that money to HMRC, they're not able to think to themselves, well, that's fine because I'm paying for a really good NHS. You know, I want to help people who are genuinely disabled. I really want to help the homeless, all of that. They're thinking to themselves, a growing number of people, well, that's so not fine because my money is just being squandered and abused and I am being ripped off by a totally profligate state and an awful lot of people who are taking benefits who do not actually need them. And that only undermines things for a minority of people who genuinely need and deserve our support.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Isabel, thank you very much.